Hello, hello. Hello, hello. It's Jodi Day. It's on the Jodi Day twice a week. So let's go. Dave's not here. Dave is out on some shenanigans with wifey, and for a good reason. For a very good reason. For a good reason. But I have a co-host. Hi, Mo.
Hello.
How are you doing, Mo?
Good. I made everyone breakfast and managed to hide a couple pieces of bacon. So, I got to eat some, which is always good.
Yeah. Oh.
And then they're like, "What's for lunch?" I'm like, "I didn't even finish. I just put the plates of all this ginormous food on the table. I don't know. Probably pizza rolls, people."
Pizza rolls are very. Oh, pizza rolls. Oh.
I'm pretty sure they cover all the food groups. You've got a vegetable-ish tomato, you've got a bread, and you've got a cheese. And if you
Yeah.
add a meat, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a full-on meal.
Yeah, I mean, this wheel of food groups and stuff like that. I mean, all covered. I have a pig wheel because I think all the parts of a pig should be yeah. Bacon, cutlets, fillet. I mean, yeah.
Barbecue. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
here for it.
Pulled pork. I mean, so many.
Ribs.
Oh, ribs. Yeah. Do you know who's still on the stand, by the way? On the Jodi trial?
I'm guessing Jodi, but
No, it's Jodi's psychotherapist.
oh god.
Believe all men are evil, words are terrorism. She-
That would be the chick she would pick. I mean,
yeah.
if you wanna sell this, you need to get a radical third way.
Yeah. And the house of Mo is filled with kids and dog. And a hair sniffing cat named Biden. Oh, Mo, Mo is getting the spoon out.
No. So my youngest daughter has a friend over, and Fry is ridiculous. So he likes to bark. So he is supposed to kind of stay in my room. But the youngest, most feral, just runs in and out, doesn't shut my door.
Ah. Oh, John is here. This is going to get spicy. He read some news articles about her testimony. Oh, we can only hope. We can only hope.
Ooh. How can it be any more spicy? I'm kind of offended that she claims that she's a photographer. All of those not so clothed pictures are really blurry. I mean,
Yeah.
isn't that kind of your gerb, if you will?
Hospice, yes, over at Dave. Thank you so much. $2. Are we still doing $1 per minute to skip? Yes, we are. So so that is 2 minutes. And so we were here, and 305, 32, 307. Yeah, around there. 2 more minutes. Yay! Thank you so much, Hospice. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah. Oh, and we just got into a sidebar, which gives you a few extra seconds. Let's see here. Okay, what's going on? Sidebar.
And jury and Ms. LaViolette, please take the stand.
What in the Kentucky Fried Chicken is her defense attorney wearing?
Thanks, back to the jury.
Sorry, I had to sneeze.
Defendant and all counsel, you may continue.
Have you had a chance to review Exhibit 603?
Yes, I have, Mr. Martinez.
And with regard to this 603, it's an important page, isn't it?
It's, you mean the statement about the manifesto or the whole
just
page?
the page.
I read the highlighted section. Did you want me to read the entire
Go ahead.
page?
Go ahead and look at 603 again.
Okay. I just was reading the highlighted.
Yeah, by the way, for you who don't know, Jodi Arias has a manifesto.
Oh my.
And
This
I
can
found
only
it.
mean-
So I'm thinking next Saturday or something of the sort, dramatic reading
Ooh.
of the because we need a small break from the psychotherapist. And how about a dramatic reading of that next Saturday? Are you in?
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Now, has anyone asked her how many cats she has and how much they hate her? Because I'm guessing that they poo in her shoes all the time
Well,
because she
it's a
dresses them up.
It's a manifesto in case she got famous.
What have we told people about writing down their crimes? It's like no one listens.
I can do a dramatic reading as long as I imitate Sal. Yeah, did you hear Sal did a Swedish accent on one of his streams? That
I
was
did.
interesting. Yeah. But we have a few more minutes left of day 42, where
Okie dokie.
Alyce LaViolette is going to talk about Jodis manifesto. Oh yeah, his name is not Mendez, it's Martinez. Sorry.
That's a hate crime right there.
And ma'am, with regard to this document, it does say important page, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And a page is 8.5 by 11, correct?
Correct.
And in this is the issue involving the manifesto, right?
Correct.
It's at the top upper left-hand corner, correct?
It's what?
It's written about on the upper left-hand corner at the top, right?
Right. What?
Sustained rephrase.
Well, with regard to this page, there is an upper left-hand corner at the very top, right?
Yes.
And on the margins on the upper left-hand corner, don't you reference the manifesto?
I didn't look at the upper left-hand corner. I looked at the body of what was written.
Sure. Just
Oh,
take a quick
the
look. See that at the
love
upper
of all that
left-hand
is
corner?
Cheetos.
Yes. Yeah.
You do reference the manifesto, correct?
Yes, I do.
And then this issue of the manifesto and the signing and all that is in the middle portion, correct?
Correct.
So this is something that you consider important.
I did.
And with regard to that, isn't it true that the defendant asked somebody named Amy to print out 2 copies of the last page of the manifesto and had them signed
Overruled.
in case
Approach, please.
Oh. I'm changing the thumbnail to Martinez because his name is Martinez, not Mendez.
Believe me, I understand because I misspelled interrogation on my,
Oh.
Shenanigans Theater, and I was like, you know what? If we can make diverse people in World War II for AI, can't the computer just figure out what I'm trying to say?
And I saw that we got raided from Flux. Hello, Flux. Thank you for the raid.
You may continue.
Isn't it true that the defendant signed those, according to your notes, in case she became famous?
Objection. We just discussed.
Overruled.
You may answer.
That information I received from
Ma'am, it's
Amy.
yes or no? It really is. It's a yes or no question.
I didn't get the information from Ms. Arias.
Judge, she's just not.
I got the information from Amy and she said that, yes.
So are you saying Amy is lying?
No, I'm not. I'm saying I didn't get it from Ms. Arias, that's all.
I'm not asking you where you got it, did I?
Okay,
All I'm asking you is for the substance of it, right?
right.
And you had no reason to believe that Amy was not telling the truth,
Overruled.
right?
Right.
Ma'am, in terms of, Judge, do you want to do the other thing that we talked about?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take the evening recess at this time. Please be back in the designated area at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Please remember the admonition. You are excused.
Yeah, and everybody go subscribe to Vielhammer Media so he can get
Yes.
closer to. So he can get to monetization. And let's find day 43.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Martinez, you may continue with cross-examination.
Ma'am, your assessment in this case and your opinion in this case was based in large part on an interview that you had with the defendant, correct?
Incorrect.
So you did not base your assessment on a 44-hour interview that you had with the defendant?
I based it on the materials that I told you that I've read.
So in terms of your assessment, nothing of what the defendant told you was important to you?
I didn't say that. I said that I didn't base my opinion entirely on my 44-hour interview.
My question was, isn't it true that your opinion in this case was based in large part on an interview with the defendant?
In part.
Oh, so it's a 50-50 kind of split?
I've just never really thought about the split, Mr. Martinez. I just take everything that I
So you
get.
don't know?
Objection, he's questioning a woman.
When I take a case, I explore every aspect of that case that I can.
So in this case, though, you did talk to the defendant, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you made a determination in your mind that she was being truthful, correct?
I made an assessment that it was worth pursuing.
Ma'am, do you remember that you and I had a conversation? And during that conversation that you told me, you found the defendant to be
Hey,
truthful,
Cindy has
I found it
for 8 months.
Defendant
Hi,
to be
everyone.
credible, and
Hi,
I would move
Cindy.
on with my investigation.
which means you found her to be truthful, right?
All right?
No, not all right. Isn't that what you found?
I found her to be credible. Yes, I did.
And credible means the same thing as being truthful, right?
I found her to be believable. Yes.
And believable means truthful, right?
I wasn't, you're asking me for a yes or no, Mr. Martinez, and what I would say to you is, I found her to be believable enough so that I would continue with the case.
So you believed her, is what you're saying.
I believed enough to be able to continue with the case.
And when you say that you believed enough, it seems to leave open the fact that perhaps you didn't believe some of the things that she was saying.
It said that I was willing to pursue the case.
I'm not asking you about whether or not you were willing to pursue the case. Do you remember that when we started this exchange, you and I asked you about your assessment. Do you remember that and your opinion?
Yes, I do.
I'm asking you about the assessment and the opinion. Your assessment and opinion is based in part, as you said, on your conversation with the defendant, right?
Correct.
And you found her during that those conversations to be believable, right?
I found her to be believable in terms of what I talked to her about at that time.
So the answer is yes, you found her believable during those 44 hours, correct?
I found her to be believable. You're asking me about my first or my entire 44 hours?
My question indicated 44 hours, ma'am. Do you understand that?
I
How
do
is this
understand
woman
that,
this?
Mr. Martinez.
Then in those 44 hours, did you find her to be believable?
Yes, I did.
Sorry, what you?
I said, so let me guess. This woman has like 18 doctorates in feminist, therapy
Nope.
theory.
No, she only has a PhD.
Okay,
She's
so she
not a
has a
psychologist.
PhD.
Yeah, so she can't
Which
call
means-
herself a psychologist. She can't perform tests and stuff like that. So she's a psychotherapist.
Okay, and but doing that, going through all school, you should be able to comprehend simple questions, right?
Yep.
She is doing the Jodi thing. Oh my God.
Yep.
They are mirroring each other. Like, well,
Yep.
did Fannie Willis watch this interview before she did her
Sarah Boone is
non-fashion?
taking notes. Amber Heard has her complete inspiration. I mean, this is 2013, before all the Me Too's and everything started. This is probably the first time in public somebody did all of this believe all women, words are terrorism stuff.
Yeah, it's just, again, it looks so much better if you just answer, in my opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, but if I were on the jury, I'd much rather you answer directly on, cross, and then let someone else, let your, whichever side you're representing, come back and rehabilitate you.
Yeah.
This, what does the word believable mean? I had a good feeling about her veracity and the verisimilitude of her hyperbole. I mean, it just.
Yeah. Well, that's why I take a brief pause between a psycho and therapist. So she's a psychotherapist. And you know what? It is 6 p.m. here. I'm having a bit of whiskey in my must.
It's noon here, and this might have some adult beverage components. Heavily diet sprited though, so you know me.
Yeah, and for the record, I do have my wheel of regrets ready in the background. If people start to say, skip ahead.
And that's part of the reason why you came in and gave us the opinion that you gave us in this case, right?
Thank you, Daniel.
In part.
Being a member.
Right. And are you familiar with the concept of secondary gain?
Yes, I am.
And the concept of secondary gain is that in situations such as this, if it's to the person's benefit, they may be deceitful, correct?
They may be deceitful.
And in this case, you found no issue with regard to the secondary gain involving this defendant, right?
I met Ms. Arias.
Judge, non-responsive, it's a yes or no.
Sam, can you answer yes or no, please?
It's not really a yes or no question.
Then we will move on.
Okay.
Ma'am, with regard to this particular case, the thought of secondary gain, did that even enter your mind?
Sure.
And did you assess it?
There's not a real way to assess secondary gain other than by looking at collateral data, which I looked at.
I'm not asking you what you looked at. I'm asking you whether or not you assessed it, yes or no.
You assess it by looking at
Judge,
collateral
I'm just not
data.
responding to you.
Not a yes or no answer.
Overruled.
Ma'am, I'm asking you, yes or no?
We're done.
Yes or no? Did you consider the issue of secondary gain in this case?
I said that I did.
And with regard to this issue of secondary gain, you, after whatever assessment that you made or whatever you considered, you decided that the issue, there was no secondary gain issue in this case, right?
I did not make an assessment of whether there was secondary gain in terms of looking, once I had looked at all the other information. There's always something that you put in the back of your head, Mr. Martinez, about what somebody's secondary gain might be. You consider that in everything. And so you take that picture and you investigate that picture and you pull in your collateral sources to do that, Mr. Martinez. And that's what I did.
So
I pulled in all the sources that I could possibly pull in to be able to assess.
So your conclusion is, based on whatever it is that you did in your mind, ma'am, your conclusion is
Finish your question.
that there was no secondary gain here, right?
I never said no secondary gain or secondary gain. I looked at all of the material and believed Miss Arias confessed to the crime.
Judge is not being responsive to the question that she's answering.
Ask another question.
With regard to this issue of secondary gain, ma'am, whether you looked at material, whether you didn't look at material, whether you did 44 hours or whether you did 38 and a half, however you looked at it, when whatever you considered, isn't it true
Thank you, John, for
that
being a
you
member.
really didn't reach a decision with regard to secondary gain in this case?
I considered it in my decision, Mr. Martinez.
So you did consider the issue of secondary gain and decided that there was no problem with that particular issue in this case.
I decided that there was domestic violence.
Judge is just not being responsive.
This is Dave. You may approach.
And
She's being
sidebar.
mean. Or
Yeah.
she's being attacked.
Yeah. I mean, I have some issues in how he asks the questions, but she's trying to get information in that isn't part of the question.
Well, and honest to goodness, after how many days was Jodi on the stand? 100 billion, or
Mm.
that's what it felt like. After
Yeah.
100 billion days of trying to ask just simple questions, and she's like, "Okay, but what is?" I can't think of maybe what the answer should be.
Mm.
I would be losing my shit too. I'd be like,
Mm.
"Ma'am, you have a doctorate, yes? Okay, you are able to read and write in English, yes." I would go full on petty, so this is why I'm not a lawyer.
And again, hi Cindy, thank you for being a member, and the same to Daniel D, to Tia Nina, and to John Comin. Thank you so. Jesus Christ, carbonated drinks are bringing the burps.
As long as you don't have any salmon paste in you, or not salmon, sardine paste.
Oh,
Otherwise, I pray for you.
this is a long.
Yes or no?
Oh, Dark Horse did ask on a too long didn't read.
Yes or no?
What is the Jodi case about?
Did you rule out secondary gain with regard to the
Okay. In 2008, Travis Alexander was found deceased in his home after some interesting choices by Jodi Arias, where she contacted and inserted herself into the case. She became a suspect. And through a few years of investigation, they more or less pinned her down as, yeah, you did it. She first said she wasn't there. She then said ninjas did it, as in masked people went in there, ended Mr. Alexander, threatened her to not say anything. That is why she, for quite some time, up until the trial, claimed this masked people. At the opening statement, or some, they came up with the self-defense part, and then crazy ensued. So her believability, in my opinion, apparently not her opinion, going from wasn't there, ninjas did it, I did it in self-defense. Yeah. So and
while taking pictures of the crime, unfortunately.
Yeah, she accidentally took pictures and then tried to erase the pictures by putting the phone in the washer. It didn't work completely.
No, she didn't even take the memory card. It's almost like she doesn't know photography. But she does do a mean legs picture. Yes, she also sells her art from prison. So if you want an original Jodi, I think it's I'm a screwup.com, but I don't know. That's what I would name it.
Mm,
Okay, yes.
let's see here. I actually have a piece of art from Jodi Arias.
Ooh.
Hmm?
It said I allegedly, just in big bubble letters.
Come on. So I have. Hold on, I haven't. Bum, bum, bum. Have this.
Ooh,
Jodi
trees.
Arias. Trees that I got from me and Dave got one from one of our viewers
Ooh,
to gift. So that was very, very
Cool.
nice of that person.
yes.
Ooh, I just discovered some. Yeah, let's get back. Let's press play. I have to go find something.
Okie dokie.
I did not rule out secondary gain.
So that means that in your assessment, there's still an possibility then that the defendant, whatever reason she may have had, may have been less than truthful with you, correct?
It was open to my other assessments that I have a limited scope here,
Objection,
Mr.
not
Martinez.
Sustained. Sustained. Next question.
My question is this, since you did not rule out this issue of secondary gain, isn't it true, ma'am, that because your assessment was lacking in that aspect, that she, the defendant, could have been less than truthful with you in those 44 hours that you spoke with her?
I didn't rule out secondary gain. I looked at it in the context of all the other information. I was limited to looking at domestic violence, and I was to assess whether I believe there was domestic violence. And Mr. Martinez, I assessed that there was. That was what I was supposed to do.
Sustained. Next question.
We know what you were there to do, but in assessing domestic violence, you by necessity have to take into account what the defendant is saying, whether or not she's being truthful, correct?
Correct.
And that involves the issue of secondary gain, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
And in this case, you just told us that you did not rule it out, which means that you did not, in this case, complete an assessment that was free, if you will, of this issue of the defendant being truthful.
There's not an assessment that rules out secondary gain, Mr. Martinez.
Well, when you sit and you talk to somebody, one of the things that we talked about yesterday was whether or not you were the human lie detector. One of the things that you do have to do is make an assessment as part of your investigation as to whether or not an individual is telling you the truth or not, correct?
There is always reasonable doubt, Mr. Martinez. That's what this
Objection, not
whole,
responsive.
no, it is
You
responsive.
may finish your question or finish your answer, excuse me.
Reasonable doubt is part of what you go into this with, I hope. Reasonable doubt is part of what any expert witness would go into a situation with. Reasonable doubt is what the jury goes in with. It's what you go in with, and then you build your foundation and you look to see whether or not you have the foundation for this. I believed I have the foundation for this, or I would never have proceeded.
With regard to this issue of reasonable doubt, that's the standard that you applied then. Is that what you're saying?
I always,
Yes or no?
sure.
And in this case, when you were assessing the defendant's statement, even though you did not rule out secondary gain, you applied this other standard of reasonable doubt, right?
I apply.
Yes or no?
It's a semantics thing, and I don't know where you go with this.
Do you have an objection?
Non-responsive.
Sustained. Next question.
So, ma'am, you did use the word beyond a reasonable doubt, didn't you?
I used the word reasonable doubt.
Yes, you did with regard to this issue of what you, in your assessment of the defendant's statements to you, right?
I have skepticism when I go in and I look at that. I have doubt. Of course I have doubt.
I'm not asking you whether or not you had doubt. I'm asking you with regard to this case and the defendant's statement, why it was that you did not rule out this issue about whether or not she could have been less than truthful with you.
I didn't say I didn't look at that.
So you did rule it out then.
I didn't entirely rule out anything.
So are you saying you did believe her or not? Which of the two?
I believed her, and I continue, as I do with my other cases, to keep an open mind about what may come up. So when I do a case, I can pull out of that case at any time if I
I'm not
don't
asking you if
believe.
you can pull out of a case. I am asking you whether or not you believed her in this evaluation. That's all I'm asking you.
Yes, I believe her.
And one of the things that you did in this particular evaluation is only talk to her, correct?
In what part of the evaluation?
Any part of the evaluation. Isn't it true that you did not talk to you didn't talk to Mr. Alexander, did you?
No, I did not.
You didn't talk to any of the other witnesses, right?
No, I did not.
The only person that you talked to was the defendant, right?
Correct.
And so in basing your opinion, you based it on large part or small part on the word of one person that was involved in the relationship, right?
His testimony. What you relied on.
You may answer.
I based it on all of the information that I read, not just on this. I read
I'm talking
for
about witnesses.
hours and hours and hours more than just looking at Miss Arias.
I understand that you want to tell us that you reviewed, you sat in your office and you read. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the mouth moving and you talking to somebody else and their mouth moving. Do we understand that that's what I'm asking?
I understand.
And with regard to that particular
you know,
issue, there was only one person.
At this point, I would be the same. I'd be like, what does an interview mean to you?
Mm.
Does it involve two people talking? And if she couldn't give me a straight answer on that, I'd be like, Judge, non-responsive, can we throw her in contempt? Also, her cats hate her.
Oh.
That you talked to, and that was the defendant, right?
Correct.
You didn't speak to Mr. Alexander, right?
Sustained.
And in your assessment of these things, there are always two sides to every issue, aren't there?
In domestic violence.
In anything.
In domestic violence, the saying goes that, as opposed to the truth being somewhere in the middle, that the truth is worse than either story because both people are minimizing and denying the story.
And you didn't speak to Mr. Alexander.
The hell? What study did she actually pull that from, other than her, women with boxed wine and cats, banjo circle?
I mean, the saying is, no,
This
that's
completely
not.
discounts
What?
the theory that someone's going to lie. And we
Yeah,
know
exactly.
people lie.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this woman. I blame the entire Me Too movement on her.
I think she has a TED talk that says,
Oh,
was
dear God.
Snow White a battered woman? And not the Brothers Grimm one, the Disney one. I mean, the Brothers Grimm story is much more correct in that term, because for you who don't know, the original story is
the Sleeping Beauty story is horrific on the original one.
Yeah, I mean, she got in the Brothers Grimm version, she got pregnant while in coma.
I mean,
by the prince.
To be fair, probably the quietest she's going to be in their marriage.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Or anybody else about whether or not she was minimizing or changing the story or anything, right?
Or whether he was.
Exactly. Whether anybody was, correct?
I read his words, as many as I had.
Ma'am, I'm talking about talking to people.
Of course, I did not talk to other people, Mr. Martinez. I did
And
not.
one of the things that you told us with regard to these type of evaluations is that 90% of all communication is nonverbal, right?
That was a fuck you smile. I mean, excuse me, sorry. Screw you smile.
Yeah, because she on the stand said that she based 90% of all communications are nonverbal, and she just got that thrown back in her face.
Oh, that must have hurt her feelers.
Yeah,
couldn't have happened to a worse person.
So when he threw that back at her,
is nonverbal, right?
So
sure, you can take that any way you want.
Yes or no? That's how I want to take it.
It's not yes or no.
You didn't testify to that previously in this court?
I made a statement.
Yes or no? Did you testify to that?
In a verbal conversation, much like you and I are having, I bet people here can read in what's going on non-verbally
And-
between the two of us. And
Ma'am,
that's what I was talking about.
I'm not interested in what you may be feeling with regard to the prosecutor. I'm asking whether or not you made the statement that in a clinical interview, 90% of the communication is nonverbal. Did you make that statement?
Yes,
And with regard to this interview that you had with the defendant, one of the people that was involved in it was missing because he's been killed, right?
yes,
And so if we apply the mathematics to it, you have a 45% chance of being wrong just right off the bat because you don't have the other person there, right?
no,
Right?
no.
One of the other things that you told us yesterday was that for you, the defendant told the truth as you knew it throughout her life, but yet when this killing happened, that's when she had problems with the truth, right? That's what you told me yesterday, right?
Yes,
Which means that you, by chance or by design, investigated her truthfulness before this incident, right?
yes.
Did you speak to her father about her truthfulness growing up?
No, I did not.
Don't you agree that, what is his name?
Bill,
Don't you agree that Bill Arias would know about whether or not the defendant had been truthful growing up?
he would have a view of her truthfulness for sure.
Right, just like anything you tell us now is a view of her truthfulness, isn't it?
Correct.
And don't you think that his view of her truthfulness has a much better basis than yours?
He has a much longer history with her, and he has a questionable history with her.
Whether or not he has a questionable history with her, she grew up in his house, didn't she?
She did.
He saw her on a day-to-day basis, right?
He did.
You didn't, did you?
No, I did not.
He dealt with her when she went to school, right?
Correct.
And he dealt with her whenever she had any issues. You did not, right?
Correct.
And he would know better than you whether or not the defendant had a reputation for honesty growing up,
Pardon? Speculation. Overruled. Me answer.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, did you review his conversation with the detective in which he talked about the defendant's truthfulness after the age of 14?
You may.
And sidebar. Oh. Skipping ahead. Skipping ahead. Yeah, Jodi Arias stopped smiling a few weeks ago.
Yeah, but why is she wearing a 4-year-old hairstyle? I mean, I
It's
understand she thinks that the jury's going to buy that she's an innocent angel, but
Yeah,
the way
especially after the less than clothed pictures. I mean,
well, I mean, according to this chick, you know, the decedent made her do all of it, and he's just terror bad, and why don't you believe all women?
yeah, exactly. Because I mean, let's ignore the fact that she brought her own lube of choice to these events. Yeah.
Well, I mean, otherwise you're going to end up using spray Pam because you forgot. So, or, you know, the night drawer has both lube and icy hot, and that's a mistake you only make once. Or a couple times if you like it. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, I don't judge. This is a long one.
Please remember the admonition. You are excused.
Oh, outside of the jury. I mean, Mr. Martinez is unhinged all the time, but in this case, against this psychotherapist, they are matching each other in some way. He's asking weird questions. He doesn't.
Record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Please be seated. Court is still in process. Mr. Martinez, you may examine the witness.
Did you guys know as to how much of a clip this is? Is this the entire interview, or are we just going to hear part?
9
Oh,
seconds.
we are hearing that
I would ask
interview.
for more information so that Ms. LaViolette can put it in context.
All right, Mr. Martinez.
He wants more information. do I need to address the issue of more information?
Yes, please. More information with this witness.
With regard to this particular case, ma'am, the truthfulness of the defendant is important to you, right?
Correct,
And in fact, you spent 44 hours with her, correct?
correct,
And in part, whether it's a small or large part, in part, your opinion is based on what the defendant told you, correct?
correct.
And then you went out and you corroborated what the defendant told you in an effort to see whether or not she was being truthful, correct?
Yeah, and some prior to meeting with her.
And in fact, yesterday when we talked about it, you told us yesterday that yes, you believe the defendant was untruthful, but her untruthfulness was after the murder. Do you remember telling me that yesterday?
Her pattern of untruthfulness.
Right,
Yes.
was after the murder, correct?
Yes,
And that I asked you specifically about before the murder, and you said you didn't see any indications that she was untruthful, correct?
with her prior boyfriends.
With anything. Remember, you told us that we talked about whether
I didn't have any evidence. I didn't see anything.
that she was untruthful, correct?
Correct.
But you are aware that there was an interview between her and between her father and the detective, Steve Flores, correct?
I didn't have that information.
So you didn't have that information. But if there is information out there from her father that indicated that the defendant was,
Objection, Judge, may we approach?
You may.
Why? The jury isn't there. I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
She's like, it makes my client look bad.
Yeah. Hi, McKinley. Yeah. They've decided to Dark Horse Productions, $3.45. That's weirdly specific. Thanks for streaming today, Nick. Appreciate you. I appreciate you back.
Yay.
Now, $3.45. That doesn't count the sidebar here, but we will do that. Skipping ahead later because I kind of want to see this.
Yeah.
She's never been honest with us, and she was only 14 then.
did you hear that?
No, I didn't.
All right, let's play it again.
She's never been honest with us, and she was only 14 then.
Did you hear him say, she hasn't been honest with us since then, and she was 14? Did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
With regard to this particular case, this is not something that you knew when you testified yesterday, correct?
No, it is not something I know.
Pardon?
No, it is not something I knew.
Isn't this something that you would have wanted to consider in deciding whether or not the defendant was being, whether or not you were going to believe the defendant in this particular case?
Objection, Judge, it would be inappropriate to ask the witness this without context to the entire interview.
This is outside the presence of the jury. You may answer the question.
Well, I would not take a soundbite of anything and make a decision on it. So I'd want to hear the whole tape. And I'd also want to put in perspective the things I'd heard about Mr. Arias. And I'd want to put into perspective what I know about teenagers.
But my question to you is,
Ma'am, you don't have
the fact
children.
that this person, her father, is saying that she hasn't been honest since the age of 14.
Objection, Ms. Characterized what he said.
Sustained.
Well, let's hear it again, okay? Then I'll ask you a question.
She's never been honest with us, and she was only 14 then.
Did you hear what he said?
Yes, I did.
He said she's never been honest with us since then, right?
Right.
And he also said she was 14, correct?
Correct.
Isn't that go contrary? Doesn't that fly in the face of what you just testified to yesterday, that she was always honest before the killing?
Ask and answer.
It doesn't fly in the face until I've assessed it. I need to find out.
What he is asking you
I
is why you
had,
didn't find it
I
out before you made your
information
assessment,
that she
ma'am.
had lied.
My
When you
God.
get information from a parent that a child lies to them during teenage years, that does not necessarily characterize someone as a liar or not. And so I would want to take that into account with the information I had that was regarding Mr. Arias as well, and his rationale for perhaps for the reason that she didn't.
Yeah. So what did the father do to Jodi Arias? According to Jodi, he was abusive. But as with everything else, there's no actual evidence of it. Doesn't mean it
Yeah.
isn't true, but it does. There's no evidence of it. Just
And
Jodi Arias' words.
I believe that she didn't make these claims until she got caught. So she
Yeah.
never told anyone else, like, my dad's really jerky, he's abusive, he's controlling.
Mm.
You know, generally,
Mm.
she would, if she's fully in victim mentality, which Jodi is, she would tell everyone and their brother, like, my dad is mean to me, he, you know, abuses me. So it's very convenient, but the fact that this, you know, psychotherapist made all of these assessments based only on people who are positively linked to Jodi, in that they would parrot her story back,
Mm.
but didn't take, and she's like, well, I'd look for reasonable doubt, but I just didn't want to talk to people that didn't think that Jodi was truthful.
Yeah. And here's the thing. She only has available what the defense gave her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she
So,
could
which
say,
is,
I haven't seen
yeah,
this.
yeah, which
I
is,
wish I had.
yeah, and this is, I mean, that would be the defense now, more or less, once this came up, is kind of throwing her under the bus,
Yeah.
because the defense, if you choose an expert witness, they kind of need all the evidence,
Yeah. I mean,
in my opinion. Now,
I
I
don't want to
know,
feel bad
Mm.
for this woman, but if she was not given a full and accurate stuff,
yeah. Now, as a psychotherapist, don't have the rules that a psychologist have. For example, you have that previous witness. He had guidelines and ethics and stuff like that. He was not allowed to give her gifts or anything, and he bought her a book. That's against the rules. This witness bought her several books and stuff, and yeah.
Lied to him.
What you're saying is that you would consider it and then you would explain this statement.
I would consider it, and then I would decide what I was going to do with it once it was considered.
Right. And it would be part of the file then, right? That's something you would consider then, right?
Yes, it would.
I don't have anything else.
So Matt, did you have any questions on this issue?
Not until she is able to have a better context of what this is actually about. I'd like to be able to either see the entire interview.
All right, Council Park.
I can see the entire interview of Jodi's dad just saying all the bad things that she did as a teenager would be awesome. And the defense is like, no, we want to show everything the dad said.
Yeah.
I would not be fighting for that, but I'm no defensologist, so.
Mm. I haven't seen it, and that completely depends on what else is in there. It might be, after I smacked her around like the little bee she is, she stopped being truthful. I have no idea what's on that tape.
Before
Yes.
Jerry comes in.
Oh, it's a 7-minute 30-second long interview. And there's a longer one in 24 minutes. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Here it is.
didn't tell me much, but I know, well, all I can tell you is what I know is that her boyfriend, I guess it was, she had talked to my other daughter, Angela, about getting married. And then we broke up, but then they became good friends because we talked to her on the phone occasionally, and she was really sporadic. Sometimes she was a real nice woman. My wife could talk to her more than I did because me and her really didn't get along good, but she was my daughter, so financially I helped her out whenever I could.
You mentioned that.
But she's a strange person because after she left the house, she just kind of got a little strange. She's really friendly. Sometimes she'll call and real sweet. 10 minutes later, she'll come and call in her rage, just screaming at my wife. She did that for the last year and a half. She was doing that a lot.
Any idea why?
No,
What's she going through?
All I could tell you is that, probably financial problems because, she was going to file bankruptcy, but she didn't have the money to. She lost her house, broke up with her other boyfriend prior to Travis. And
Oh, that was news. The boyfriend prior to Travis
Yeah.
filed for bankruptcy and lost the house. I did not know that. That's not in this trial.
No, Jodi saw greener pastures.
Yeah. That would explain her jumping that ship.
Yeah.
never seen a picture of Travis. She showed my other kids, but she's never showed us anything.
I know you probably want some details, but her ex-boyfriend Travis Alexander was killed in June 4th. And it was during the time when Jodi was traveling from here to Salt Lake City. And we did track her route, and we believe she did go to Mesa. We have a lot of evidence in the house that points towards her as being the person who committed the murder. The only thing I don't have is why she committed this.
I know, man. She was getting along with him so good. She was, because he was even offering her car, and then the U-Haul ruined it because they didn't take it out of gear because she didn't know what she was doing. He hooked it up.
Yeah, the BMW.
Yeah, I remember. And she told me, how are you going to pass or how are you going to pay him? He goes, Travis said I could just pay him, on payments. She said, but then we're going to go through a prepaid legal where I guess she was doing something. She said they're going to sue U-Haul for not, setting it up right. As far as I know, that's all. I don't talk to her much, but she did. I just can't believe that she did it because she told me she was going to Utah. She told me her route. She was going to go down to see some friends in Big Sur or Monterey, and then she was going to go to LA to the convention, and she was going to go right up to Utah. I says, and then after this happened, I just kind of got it in.
Yeah, that's technically true because in a bankruptcy, they kind of need to sell assets, including the house. So not entirely truth, but part of it. So apparently, so far, that is excluded because that was technically hearsay when it comes from him and from the dad and her former boyfriend, the older guy, did not say anything about it on the stand. So probably was ruled for pre-trial. That is not needed.
Nation, I go, wow, man, I don't think so, because she was just acting so normal. And then when she heard about the news, I think it was either Friday or Saturday after he was killed. I don't know, was he killed on Thursday or something?
He was found on Monday the 9th,
Okay.
like late at night.
Okay, because I know there was that weekend she bawled her eyes out. She was already back, and everything was nice. She came over to the house once, nothing big, no big deal. And then she went home, and then that day I called her and she couldn't even talk, and I go, what's going on? She goes, Travis was murdered. And
What did you think?
I didn't do much. I just thought, what the hell? Well, I want to know what she did. And all she could tell me is, later on she kept telling me she was going to leave the area. I go, why? She goes, because why? And then she came over one day. I was on Dallas, just got on Dallas, sat down with my wife, and we talked to her for 3 hours while I was on it, trying to get the question. She said, I can't tell you what's going on, but all I know is I got to leave. And I go, why? She goes, because I might be blamed for something. I go, what? And he goes, I can't tell you. She goes, I just won't tell you. And she refused to, never told us. Even this morning when I picked her up at the house to go to the Hertz, I said, okay, your final chance. He says, you're under, she said she was going to be back in 3 days, she told us. At least she told me that. And I said, are you going to tell me or what? I said, I want to know. And she goes, I can't tell you. She says, I don't want you to get involved in anything, so I'm not telling you nothing. And I just go, oh, well. And then I thought, and then she told me that she quit her job yesterday because the police had called me. And then I said, well, what are you running away for if you're not guilty? She goes, because I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be part of anything or something like that. And I go,
Where was she going? Did she tell you
I have
where?
no idea. She just told me she's leaving and she goes, she'll see us some other time, but it's going to be a while. But then today she told me she was going to be back in 3 days because she left a lot of her stuff at her grandma's house.
Well, I talked to her for over an hour and a half, and I left with more questions than I had answers for. I still don't know why. She just refuses to tell me why.
She won't talk to us either.
Yeah, she won't talk to me. And I've been talking to her since the day after Travis was found. I talked to her on the phone, and she called me 3 times that week. It was a couple times the following week. Every week she calls me. And I just sense that there's something there. And from day one, even before we found our first piece of evidence linking her to it, I knew there was something there.
Well, you know, first time she doesn't trust us because we're parents. When she was in 8th grade, she got busted for growing marijuana with our Tupperware, putting it on top of the roof. We found it, they called the sheriff department. And then they busted her, and then, I don't know, some of her friends or something. And then we searched her room. That was the first time we've ever searched her room. And after that, she was kind of like something turned in her head that we were nosy parents and we were gonna search everything she had. So she hid everything from us and always has since then.
Wow.
She's never been honest with us since then. And she was probably 14 then, and she has never been honest with us ever since then. And then when she had the house in
Okay, so she did something stupid, and then they started to search for stuff in her room.
Yeah.
And since then, she's never been honest with them. And okay,
But I mean, go for it, defense. Play the entire interview. She doesn't sound like a good person.
yeah, go ahead, defense. Play it for the jury.
I dare you,
Palm
please.
Desert was. We told her we wanted to come visit her, and she goes, where are you going to stay? She didn't want to stay in her house because she was afraid we were going to snoop through her stuff. And I go, hey,
That is kind of strange.
that's just the way she's been. And then when she was in Palm Desert after that, man, that's when everything, I don't know what, it's been a couple of years then. I said she's been a little crazy for a year. It's been longer than that. Now that I think about it, when she moved to Palm Desert, because, she started using her credit card to make her $3,000 a month payments because she lost her job or something. And then she got just financially in debt.
That's not good. She hasn't been in a good situation in a while then, huh?
No, it's been bad.
Well, this Travis guy, I guess, helped her out quite a bit.
As far as I know, but I do know that one day when she called me crying hysterically when she decided to move to Mesa, Arizona, she snuck up at his house and she looked in the window and she saw him there on the couch with another woman. And she was planning on marrying this guy. So she just left.
I mean, I shouldn't be laughing, but
Hmm.
please, defense, play the whole thing.
Yeah, please, defense. Play the whole thing. Play the whole thing.
I need this
To the
in my
jury.
life.
Yeah.
But she's going to say, but Jodi claimed he was abusive, so this is obviously an abuser trying to cover his tracks.
Yeah. Well, that was interesting. So she racked up some credit card bills, and all of a sudden, okay, now we kind of know how that the bankruptcy thing.
Yeah, she just, this can't be. The defense has left this woman, who I greatly dislike, because of her views, but holy God, why?
And I just removed some messages in the dates chat. Don't
Okay.
beg for money. That's our job.
Yeah. We are griftologists here. We have
Yeah.
our own league, our own union. It's just, you have to learn the secret handshake.
And her dad wasn't Mormon. They are Catholics. She converted to Mormonism. So, yeah. Okay, let's move on with the trial. Or if they're going to play the entirety, I'm going to get mad because I just searched for it and played it, but then we can skip ahead. Skipping ahead. Technical issues. Oh.
And all counsel, Mr. Martinez, you may continue.
With regard to the
Oh, and 2 minutes skip ahead. Boom.
Domestic violence in the context of the relationship, which was really what I was intended. I mean, what I came on to do.
I'm not asking you whether or not you focused on that. You understand that?
I
You understand that?
I understand what you're saying.
I'm asking you whether or not you believe the defendant when she told you, or the information that you received during this investigation, whether or not you believe that the cuts to her hands were caused while she was cutting apples, green apples.
Objection, Judge Foundation, as to when, where this happened.
Sustained.
Well, ma'am, let me show you your notes about this particular incident, okay?
Did she get her doctor's?
Yes, you can put it in your glasses.
Fine, take a look at the highlighted portion. And once you've read the highlighted portion, let me know.
Your Honor, may the witness read the entire page so she has context of it?
Yes.
He probably did. Doesn't mean she wasn't into a bunch of those things. For instance, the phone sex thing, she initiated. So,
Yeah. I mean, look, she mirrors, Jodi is the type that she's an Amber Heard. She will mirror exactly what she wants you to
Did you
think
read
she
the entire
is.
page?
Yes,
May I have it back, please?
sure.
This is your handwriting, right?
Yes, it is.
And this deals with this issue about the cuts on the hands that the defendant received at the time of Travis's death, right?
Correct.
And in it, your notes reflect that Jodi said, cut.
thank you for being a member on my channel, Traveling Science Man. You now have access to all my members only things on the channel, which is many, many hours, 50 hours, 60, something like that.
Yeah.
And you also have
Nicholas
access
is
to
the
my
best at member stuff. I am terror bad at member stuff.
Yeah, in all of LawTube, I'm producing the most members-only content I've heard. So I didn't know that. If I had known, I might have produced less. But here we are.
He's like, I would have grifted more. I would have.
Yeah. And for you who consider it, it's $3 a month. And you also can get access to all of my members-only content. Yay! Thank you so much, Traveling Science Man.
Cuts on her hands were from cutting apples, right?
Correct.
So with regard to that issue about cutting apples, did you verify whether or not that may or may not have been true?
No, I did not.
You could have gone to collateral sources, like you said, right?
I could have.
You could have gone, for example, to the police report, right?
I could have.
You didn't do that, right?
I did read the police report.
And do you know whether or not there were any statements in that police report of what the defendant said caused the cuts on her hands?
No, I don't.
But you did read the police report, right?
I read the police report very long ago and didn't reread it.
So the answer is you did read the police report, right?
I did read the police report.
And do you know whether or not, from your memory, whether or not there was any indication what she said caused the cuts on her hands?
No, I don't.
One of the things that you told us was that you reviewed, well, let's do it this way. Did you review her statements to the police?
I did. I reviewed them a long time ago. And
I'm not asking you, am I asking you when you reviewed them, ma'am?
You're
I am
asking
not.
me if I reviewed them, and I'm putting that in the context that I reviewed them a very long time ago.
I'm not asking you for a context. Do we understand each other?
I understand you don't want context.
Ma'am, Judge, I would ask that she be admonished for the last comment as to what the prosecutor wants.
Yeah, she answered the question.
All right, move on. Next question.
Ma'am, with regard to this particular case, you did review her statements to the police, right?
I did.
You reviewed the videotapes, right?
To the police?
Yes.
No, I did not.
So you just reviewed a transcript of it, right?
Correct.
And in that transcript, isn't it true that there's a different version of how she cut that finger?
I guess there is, because you're telling me and I don't remember.
No, I don't want you to, so.
I don't remember. I don't recall, Mr. Martinez, honestly.
All
I
right,
don't recall.
let's assume that there were 4 different versions of how that finger was cut.
Judge mischaracterizes testimony.
Assume that there are 4 different versions of how she cut her fingers. Wouldn't that cause any problems for you in evaluating this case, because there clearly is an inconsistency there?
Mr. Martinez, people
Yes
lie.
or no?
No, that would not be a complete answer.
All right? No, it would not cause a problem for you, or yes, it would cause a problem for you?
I cannot answer that yes or no and be honest about how I answer it.
With regard to this case also, you were aware of this issue involving gas cans that the defendant supposedly asked her boyfriend about before she took this trip. You're familiar with that, right?
Daryl Brewer.
Right. Yes,
Yes,
you're familiar with that. And you're familiar with the fact that before she went on this trip, she asked Mr. Brewer for the use of 2 gas cans to take on the trip, right?
I am.
And in fact, that caused you problems, didn't it?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, that caused you problems in terms of the defendant's truthfulness, didn't it?
I
You
don't,
look over there. No, I'm not asking the question.
No,
That caused
I'm-
you problems, didn't it?
I don't believe it did. I
Well, let's
think,
take a look at your notes.
all right.
She's like, I don't remember telling the truth on my notes.
Let
Damn
me show you
it.
the exhibit first.
Okay.
Dr. Mimo, this person is still on the stand because Mr. Martinez wants to completely ruin her credibility.
Give you a little context, take a look
Doing
at
a fair
exhibit
job herself.
607. Read the whole thing and then let me know when you're done.
All right.
And yeah, a lot of lawyers in this trial has been disbarred. Jodi Arias' lawyer, Mr. Nurmi, was disbarred shortly after this trial because he wrote a know-all book about Jodi Arias. And a few years later, Mr. Martinez voluntarily took himself off the bar because there would have been a hearing about his misconduct towards females in his office, which would have gotten him disbarred.
Just crazy.
Skip.
That's, have you
Right.
read it?
Yes, uh-huh.
That's your handwriting on this particular page, right?
Right,
And it does reference this issue involving the borrowing of 2 gas cans from Darrell Brewer, right?
right, but
Yes or no, does it?
yes, it
And
does.
doesn't it indicate that on the last week of May of 2008, Jodi told Darrell she needed to borrow 2 gas cans because she was taking a long trip to Mesa? Doesn't it say that?
In part, it says that.
It does say that though, doesn't it?
In part, it says that.
Well, let's read the whole part. Last week of May of 2008, Jodi told Darrell she needed to borrow 2 gas cans because she was taking a long trip to Mesa and didn't want to run out of gas, right? That's what it says.
That's in part what it says. That's not what the rest of it
I'm
says.
talking about the issue involving.
Does Mesa
the
not have
cans.
gas
That's all it says about the
stations?
gas cans, doesn't it?
Well, it
I'm
talks
asking
about the
gas
trip.
cans. Take a look at it.
I look at it. I took notes on what people said. I took the notes right off what people said. I don't necessarily have a problem with what I said. I took notes to ask questions.
And isn't that how you do your did the evaluation in this case? You take what somebody said, and then you look at everything else, and then you come in and tell us that this is domestic violence, right?
This doesn't have anything to do in particular with the domestic violence I was assessing, Mr. Martinez.
You took this, you used.
Okay. Traveling Scienceman have a comment I missed.
Oh.
Discord link is out of date. I will update it and put a new link there for members.
The same procedure with regard to this particular issue that you used with regard to any other issue in this case, right?
I'm not certain that that would be true, but I'm not certain what you're referring to. What I did with this case, if you want to know what I did with this
No, I
case.
don't want to know what you did with this
Okay.
case. I want you to answer my question. And my question to you is, isn't it true that you've been telling us that in this case, you've looked at writings and you reviewed those and took those into account, right?
Correct.
Isn't the same thing that you did with regard to the gas cans? You read it, you took it into account, and you made notes on it, right?
I did.
And with regard to that particular issue, that caused you some problems, didn't it?
No, the gas cans didn't cause me problems.
Isn't it true that you had an issue with that because you believe that perhaps the defendant may not be truthful? Isn't that a problem for you?
I think my question was, what does this mean on the side of the page? And I was asking about what that meant. I wanted to get a description of what erratic behavior meant.
Actually, isn't it true, ma'am, that what you thought back then is why did the defendant want to borrow 2 gas cans from Darrell? Did she know she was going to?
And he's reading from something that's not been marked or in evidence.
Isn't it true that you were concerned that she had told you about the trip, and now you have this issue about her going to Mesa, and then you said, I thought this was a last-minute decision. Didn't that create a problem for you?
I didn't hear the question.
Isn't it true that you had questions about it because you thought it was a last-minute decision to go to Mesa?
I still think it was a last-minute decision.
And that.
How if it was a week until she went there?
So are
And
we
also-
going to use
Yeah.
are we going to use the female, like we don't have concept of time, like time is amorphous and a social construct? Is that what we're doing now?
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah. And if she says borrowing 2 gas cans because she was traveling to Mesa, instead she traveled to Travis to kill him. I think that's a bigger issue about her truthfulness and being honest. But according
Yeah.
to this expert, before she wasn't untruthful until after the
Well,
killing.
it also, are there no gas stations in the state of Arizona, so you're forced to carry jerry cans with you?
Well, she had to have the gas cans because to leave no trace of her actually traveling to Travis. Her plan was to get
Well,
away with it.
Yeah.
And then she started calling the cops and left the camera and took pictures of herself. And yeah.
She would have gotten away with it if it weren't for her pesky self.
Yeah, exactly. Unless for herself, she would have gotten away with it.
Caused you problems in the context of exhibit number 607, which is what she told you about Daryl and the gas cans, right?
I had a problem.
Take a look at.
I had a question. You're saying a problem, I had a question.
Take a look at 608. See if you recognize the whole page.
I did ask her that.
You may-
Ma'am, did you read exhibit 608?
Yes, I did.
That's in your handwriting, right?
Correct.
And in fact, the approach that you took here were some looking at things that you had problems with in this case,
I
right?
had questions about it.
Questions that you had in this case, right?
Yes,
And one of the questions that you had in this case involved the gas cans, didn't it?
yes, it did.
And in fact, you indicated that your words were something to the effect of, you thought it was a last-minute decision and it was creating a conflict for you, right?
I wanted to make sure that it was a last-minute decision. I had questions that I wrote throughout, and I asked those questions.
And that was one of the questions that you had, was that you
Yes.
thought this was a last-minute decision, right?
Yes,
And thinking that it was a last-minute decision, in your mind, it did not make any sense that she would go to Daryl Brewer and ask for 2 gas cans to go to Mesa, because that happened many days before the trip started, right?
Objection is mischaracterizing what Ms. Arias actually said. She never said that. The summary of the notes are not what Ms. Arias said.
Overruled. You may continue.
Okay,
okay.
you may answer.
I had a question about the gas cans, and one of the questions I had was because I don't know how far Utah is from Wairika. I wanted to know why she needed gas cans. That's all.
But your
And,
notes,
and I wanted to know if there was a decision to go to Mesa, which I had written, and later in that same page, it talks about the trip to Southern California and Utah. So I wasn't clear about whether Mesa was an intended trip or not, and I wanted
Well-
to find out whether it was.
are you saying, ma'am, that you did not write in your notes last week of May 8, Jodi told?
Objection, Your Honor, reading from an exhibit, it's not in evidence.
Absolutely am. I'm impeaching her now with the statement because if you want to address it.
Judge, it's not,
Approach, counsel.
Okay. Another
The judge is going to
sidebar.
turn this trial around and no one's getting Frosties.
Skipping ahead. Oh, it's a long one. But
In this particular, other people call them, what you've been telling us is that you took statements from a number of people, and we call them collateral sources, right?
Correct.
And you looked at those statements from other people, these collateral sources, and then you compared them to other collateral sources and any statements by the defendant, right?
Correct.
In this particular case,
yes, we've heard from other psychologists. We heard the previous witness was a psychologist who did tests and everything, and his credibility was ruined as well. And
you
Well,
viewed
his
the
stupidity
statement
knows
as a
no
collateral
gender.
source, right?
I did.
Daryl Brewer, right?
Correct.
And in viewing the statement of Daryl Brewer, there was this statement about the defendant requesting or asking to borrow some gas cans in late May of 2008, right?
Correct.
And with regard to this statement from Mr. Brewer involving the gas cans being borrowed in 2008, the indication was that the defendant told him she needed to borrow 2 gas cans because she was taking long trip to Mesa and didn't want to run out of gas, right?
Correct.
In terms of you saying Utah and talking about Utah and how far Utah is, this page, ma'am, take a look at it again. It has no mention of Utah whatsoever. It doesn't. Read it.
Oh, she's going to have to get her reading glasses out.
Jodi said she was going to visit.
No, read it to yourself.
It does mention Utah.
And it mentions it at the very bottom, doesn't it?
No, it mentions it about in the same paragraph as the question about Mesa, and it mentions the Grand Canyon.
All right, go ahead. Let me have it back.
Okay.
But it mentions Utah, man, after she goes to Mesa, right?
It says Mesa, and then it says the other things.
Right. It talks about what she's going to do it, but it doesn't talk about Utah first, does it?
No.
And that created a problem for you, didn't it?
I had to ask a question.
Didn't it?
It created a question for me.
Okay, it created a question for you because you thought this decision to go to Mesa was a last-minute decision, right?
Correct.
And what you did is, with regard to this issue, even though you reviewed a statement to the police and all the other items in this case, you decided to resolve this conflict or this question in favor of the defendant, right?
I asked the defendant about it. She told me that that she had not said she was going to Mesa, she was going to Utah. And also the journals indicated, and the IMs when they were talking about planning trips. So I used other things to look at that. But yes, I had a question about it for sure.
And you decided to resolve it in favor of the defendant, irrespective of what you used, right? Irrespective of what sources you used, right?
No, in respect to other sources I used. And I don't remember the police report. I'm very sorry. I don't remember that.
With regard to this issue as to whether or not she was going to Mesa first, ma'am, isn't it a fact that you could have just called or had an interview with Mr. Brewer to try to determine what it was that he said? You could have done that, right? You do that as part of your investigations, don't you?
I could have, but I was basically told to rely on the information that I had.
Well, now you're indicating that you were restricted somehow by somebody. I don't want to know who you were restricted by. Have you ever voiced an objection here during testimony that you were ever restricted in your approach in this case?
No.
And in this case, no one was directing your investigation, was it? Were they?
No.
I have to break the good news here for about the question, because she's on the stand for 3 more days after this day.
The defense is like, how do I update my well, I guess it would. Did LinkedIn exist back then? But they're like, updating my LinkedIn status to looking to be hired.
Yeah. Now there's an
In
easy
Guam.
way for us to move ahead.
Yes. But if you want to see into the future and how this dogma comes to be, it would be this chick. I'm blaming her for all of it. I
Yep.
really am.
You're independent. In other words, you have an independent assessment here to make an independent assessment, right?
Yes.
And as part of that investigation, you could have spoken to Daryl Brewer to see whether or not what his recollection was, right?
I keep expecting him to say Daryl Brooks, and you're muted.
Yeah. The defense do try to rehabilitate her.
It's just hard when someone's already pulled the
I
plug.
asked about interviewing other people, and I was given the information, the collateral sources.
Yes.
And sidebar.
This judge is like, where did you find this woman? Although
there
I
was-
do think that Sarah Boone's defense, whoever it may be, herself or her 18th lawyer, should definitely look at getting this doctor to come and interrogate her.
Yeah, I mean, she's still practicing. And yeah.
Isn't it true then that with regard to your finding that there was domestic violence in this case because you didn't do this interview, and it talks about different stories, isn't it true that your assessment of domestic violence is deficient?
No, I don't believe it is.
Even though you didn't interview Mr. Brewer, correct? Yes or no? I don't want to get any further than yes or no on this one.
Okay. I didn't interview Mr. Brewer.
And even though you didn't interview, because you didn't interview Mr. Brewer, your assessment in this case, at least to a certain extent, is lacking.
I don't think so.
And you didn't interview, well, you're the one that told us that with regard to these kinds of things, conversations are only part of, conversations can form a part of your investigation, right? You did say that though, right? Yes or no?
The conversations are part of my, right.
And in fact, in other cases, you have conducted interviews with other people, correct?
In most murder cases, I have not.
So
I've used collateral sources.
So you're saying that with regard to your assessments in criminal cases, don't restrict it to murder cases. With regard to the criminal cases, what you're saying is you don't interview other people, you just interview the defendant and look at collateral sources. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
It depends on the case, and it depends on what is available for me to review. In some cases, there are financial restrictions. They say these interviews have been done. I'm given those interviews. So it depends on the attorney, and it depends, and it doesn't matter whether it's the prosecution or the defense, Mr. Martinez. There's a limit to what they give me. And
I'm really not asking you to go into that, and if you don't mind not going into that area that
Okay.
you just went into, okay?
All right.
I'm just asking you whether or not, it's a yes or no, and if you can't answer yes or no, tell me and we'll move on, all right?
Okay.
With regard to your other criminal cases, isn't it true that in those other criminal cases, on occasion, you have conducted interviews? Yes or no?
I really am reflecting on the criminal cases, trying to reflect on the criminal cases that I have done. Generally, it's been paperwork.
Generally means that you have, at least on a couple of occasions.
I'm leaving it open because I know that you are, it's like very precise, and I am not certain, so.
So you don't know is what you're saying?
Yes, I'm not certain.
Ma'am, one of the things that your investigation revealed in this case, and we've talked about this issue of secondary gain, and we talked about some inconsistencies here. One of the things that your investigation revealed was that the defendant is very manipulative, isn't she?
I don't think that I don't believe I said she was very manipulative.
Isn't it true that you reviewed collateral sources that indicated the defendant was very manipulative?
There were collateral sources that said she was manipulative.
Right, isn't it true that, in fact, it was people that were close to her who indicated, for example, that...
May we approach?
You may approach.
And sidebar.
The judge is like, could we please
Yeah.
get something done?
Continue.
You received information that the defendant was manipulative, correct?
Yes.
In fact, you received information that the defendant was not abused. She just...
Objection, Judge. This is what we discussed.
Overruled to that question.
Isn't it true that your investigation revealed that she was not abused, but liked to play the victim? And that's part of the manipulation.
I don't recall that.
Let's take a look at your notes.
Okay.
She's like, did I write that down? Damn it.
I should stop taking notes.
Take a look at Exhibit 609, read the whole thing.
Guarantee you, the next trial she was an expert at, her notes fell on a boat accident.
Isn't it true that your investigation revealed that the defendant liked to play the victim?
This was about high school, Mr. Martinez.
Whether or not it's from high school, ma'am, isn't it true that that's part of something that you thought it was important enough to write down?
I thought she also said that she wasn't untruthful and stuff until after the killing. But here she is saying, well, that was in high school. That doesn't count.
She, if I were not him, and he's obviously just pissed off, I would say, okay, then how do you determine whether an untruth is, valid, a consistent sign of a, behavior pattern, or one that you can just ignore? What gives you that, how is it that you are able to make those judgments? Wouldn't you write down everything if you're open-minded?
Yeah.
If you came in with a presumption of doubt?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the prosecution, well, you say she was honest and truthful before, and then how about this example? How about that example? How about this example? How about that? Just pinpoint. Here you have 6 different occasions when she was manipulative and didn't tell the truth, but you still say she was honest before the killing. And yeah, so he keeps spinning around the same issue over and over again.
I mean, that's where I wouldn't draw this out, because I would think that the jury would be pissed off and tired enough. I would simply ask that question and then go through and say, how did you determine, or what criteria did you use to, state that this was an untruth, but it definitely doesn't count towards the underlying truthfulness of this person, versus this person, people from around Jodi are considered liars right off the bat. So I need to understand your criteria if you are claiming to be impartial.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me answer that correct. Let me answer that fully. I took notes on every interview and I wrote down the essence of the notes. In that particular interview with Zaina, her high school friend or junior high friend, her friend was talking about Jodi liking to play the victim. And that was in junior high or high school. So that was a piece of what I took into consideration, sure.
And playing the victim and being manipulative, that's a character trait, isn't it?
It doesn't have to be a character trait. It can be a transient situation. It can be situational, Mr. Martinez.
It can be situational, but there's no indication anywhere that this was a situational thing, was there?
It's the observation of one other young girl
who knew her well at the time that she was growing up, right?
A young girl.
Right. So you're saying that when an individual is of a certain age,
Did she not
you
believe
can't pay
all
attention to what
women?
they say, right?
No, I paid attention to what she said and weighed it with the other things that I read.
So you did consider this information, is what you're telling us, in
Sure.
making this assessment. And the information that you considered was that growing up, the defendant liked to play the victim, right?
From one source. That was one source.
Did I ask you what source? I did not, did I?
I guess I'm trying to figure out if you want a complete answer or not.
I want you to answer my questions. Isn't it true that you just told me that you considered this information? Yes or no?
Yes, I considered it.
Isn't it true that the information that you considered was that the defendant was not abused, but she liked to play the victim? Yes or no?
Contrary to other sources, yes.
Am I asking you about contrary sources, ma'am?
Contrary
Yes or
to
no?
other sources, yes, that would be true.
Yeah, this is not a political channel. And I don't mind people going off chart in the chat, but please get back to what we're actually watching, because YouTube kind of sees what you're talking about in the chat, and that could be positive or negative for me as a channel and Dave. So certain areas unless it's the actual subject of the stream. Please avoid it.
And I'm not asking you about contrary sources. I'm asking you whether or not that's something that you consider. Yes or no?
Objection, answer.
Yes,
And this information that she, whatever it was, the term is manipulative, this is something that you had when you were considering this whole issue of abuse, right?
correct.
And again, you gave the benefit of the doubt to the defendant because you never even asked her about it, right? Did you even ask the defendant about her playing the victim?
I asked her about that report, but I also looked
So
at
you did.
statements from Jodi's mother, Jodi's sisters, Jodi's grandparents, and Jodi's siblings, and looking at the issue of Jodi playing the victim.
But you didn't speak to the defendant herself directly about it, did you?
I don't recall if I did or not.
Do your notes reflect that you ever talked to the defendant about that?
My notes don't reflect everything I talked to the victim, or
Well,
the-
wouldn't it have been
defendant
important
about.
in this case, since we're talking about abuse, to ask the
Just
defendant
called her a
whether or not she
victim?
had manipulated people into thinking she'd been abused before?
I had talked to her about being abused before, and I never got an impression from her or from other collaterals that she was in the habit of playing the victim. And what I'm looking for are patterns of behavior here, Mr. Martinez, not isolated instances.
I'm not asking about patterns. I'm asking about whether or not you asked her specifically about this issue, about her being accused of playing the victim when she was not abused.
Objection, answer.
I do not recall, if I ask her specifically.
But isn't that what we're here to discuss? Whether or not the defendant was abused in a domestic violence situation? Isn't that what we're here to discuss?
Yes,
And so.
in the relationship with Mr. Alexander.
I understand that, but we're talking about abuse though, right?
We're talking about the relationship specifically with Mr. Alexander.
And if in another circumstance, the individual had pretended to be a victim of abuse, you don't consider that to be important in your assessment.
This characterizes the notes that were on there and her testimony.
Overruled, you may answer the question.
No other collaterals suggest that Ms. Arias is playing the victim or that she did. In fact, they talk about her being a victim of her father and her mother at times.
Do you consider this information to be so unimportant that you didn't consider it? This information, was it so unimportant to you that you didn't even address it with the defendant?
I am sure I addressed it to some degree.
Then tell me what she said with regard to this issue about playing the victim. Tell me.
Nothing that stands out in my mind.
So you can't tell me anything, correct, about what she
I can
said?
tell you that she
Yes
has,
or no? Can you tell me anything that she said with regard to this issue?
I cannot tell you specifics, no.
Ma'am, the other thing that we know is that not only is there this indication that she was manipulated at that age, isn't it true that after she...
Objection, mischaracterizing the testimony. Manipulative at that age. That's not what it was.
The same rephrase.
With regard, isn't it true that we know that at that age, whatever the age that was, that she was perceived to be somebody who played the victim, even though she was not abused? In addition to that, isn't it true that your investigation revealed,
Overruled.
isn't it true that your investigation revealed that after she killed Mr. Alexander, she was very manipulative?
After she killed, well, part one, I have one collateral source that says she was manipulative. So when you characterize me saying that she was manipulative, that is incorrect. Part two is, yes, I'm not sure what you're talking about in terms, if you could describe what you mean by manipulative.
No.
Afterwards, I would be.
I'm
I would
asking
answer.
you whether or not you remember, as you're sitting there, any information from any source indicating that the defendant was manipulative shortly after she killed Mr. Alexander.
Manipulative regarding what or to whom?
Manipulative is, do you understand what the word manipulative means, right?
Well, I'm not sure how you mean it,
No.
Mr. Martinez.
Use the Webster Dictionary definition of it. What does manipulative mean to you?
Manipulative
Well,
can
that's the
mean
full
manipulating
no
facts. It
Bronco.
can be deceiving.
What you say?
I said I'm about to go full no tie Bronca and repeal the 19th Amendment and make that a platform of my presidential run.
It seems like this she has a narrative, and this is what
Yes.
she does for a living. That believe all women. Words are violence and stuff like that. And that is probably why they hired her, because they knew she would
I would
disregard
ask her
disregard
she
anything that says Miss Aries is a lying liar who lies and a stabby that shoots. And
yeah.
and sh- yeah.
I would ask her if she's aware of the concept of cognitive dissonance. And she would just, pontificate on. And then I would say, well, it's very interesting because it seems you're displaying cognitive dissonance because there's all this evidence that this heifer done, unalive this dude. And you're like, and no evidence that he was ever in any way aggressive toward her other than he just didn't want to marry her. She was a rental. Dissonance. Sorry, not dissidence. Look, to be fair, the fact that I can say words at all is amazing. I learned from the MLS school of saying stuff cool. So,
I know big words.
I pretend
Or
to.
I can say big words.
Sometimes.
People, is that what you're asking me?
I'm asking you for your definition of manipulative. That's what I'm asking.
If you're asking me if she,
No, I'm not. I'm asking for a definition of Webster's.
He's not allowing her to finish her answer.
Overruled. Ask your next question.
Give me your definition of manipulative, whatever it may be.
my definition?
Yes, as you applied it in this case.
Asked and answered. She already answered this question.
Overruled. You may answer the question.
That someone can manipulate or deceive or, I haven't been asked for a Webster's dictionary definition, but basically that you can manipulate data means you can change them, that you can deceive or tell half truths,
And with regard to the defendant, isn't it true that you received information that she was manipulative shortly after, in her relationship with men, shortly after the killing?
with men?
Yes.
With what men?
Well, do you remember, do you even have any memory of your notes involving what the defendant did after she reached her story?
Are you talking about her trip to see Ryan in Utah?
No,
Are you talking about her experience in the restaurant? I have no idea what specifically.
Wait a minute, we have a restaurant hookup?
Do you remember her experiences at the Purple Plum? You remember
Yes.
about that?
Yes,
And do you remember that you have information involving the Purple Plum with regard to her interaction with men?
yes.
And that interaction with men indicated that she was.
And sidebar.
As to the incident at the Purple Plum.
Is this regarding, there were several interviews about the Purple Plum, so I'm not sure which interview you're referring to, Mr. Martinez.
I'm referring to the one involving whether or not the defendant was manipulated with men.
There was an interview with a waitress who said she was manipulative, or was only nice to good-looking men.
How about the interview with the manager, Carrie Brinkham? Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with it. I don't remember every detail of it, if you
All
like
right,
me
let
to
me go
look
ahead and
at that.
provide that to you then.
Sure.
Take a look at Exhibit 610. They shared it all, including the margins.
Sure.
This is these notes are in your handwriting, correct?
Yes, they are.
And you completed them as part of your investigation in this case, correct?
I was taking notes on the interview, yes,
And this is what you did with regard to this investigation. You would look at collateral sources and you would take those, correct?
correct.
And you would use them either then or later as part of the evaluation. It's something you considered, right?
Yes,
And in this particular case, there was an individual that was the manager of the Purple Plum, right?
correct.
And you talked to the defendant. She worked at the Purple Plum at some point, right?
Yes, she did.
And when she worked at the Purple Plum, there was this indication, or your investigation revealed, was that the defendant was manipulative towards men, right?
Objection foundation.
Well, ma'am, what do your notes indicate that, well, do you want the date, ma'am? Take a look at the date on Exhibit 610, if that refreshes your recollection as to when this happened. I'll point it out to you.
Okay.
What date are we talking about where this manipulation occurred?
June 13th, 08.
And during this manipulation, it involved men, the defendant and men, correct?
Correct.
And specifically, it involved the defendant, her interaction with men, correct?
Correct.
And your investigation revealed that she would feign.
Objection hearsay.
Approach, please.
10 to 1, the judge has a flask behind that.
Yeah, and I mean, she's an expert witness. She's allowed to use hearsay in her evaluation. So
And the part of the investigation that you found out was that the defendant was manipulative in her interaction with men, correct?
Objection.
Overruled. You may answer yes or
Correct.
no.
She was flirtatious with him. I don't know if she was manipulative with him. He says she used them.
All right. Using men, given your previous definition, that's someone who's manipulative, correct?
That would be correct.
And so, given that, isn't that something that it's something that you considered and ultimately rejected in favor of the defendant, right?
Actually, I looked at behavior after the homicide, and that was after the homicide,
Right?
that I would consider would be aberrant behavior. And according to her other history in working in restaurants, that was never part of it. And at working at Casa Ramos, that was not part of it, according to the owner. So I looked at behavior after the murder or after the killing, and I would say that unusual aberrant behavior would be part of that.
And that's your assessment, if you will, of her behavior, correct?
Yes,
And that's your assessment of her behavior, even though the indications are what they are as part of the investigation, correct?
the indications,
They.
there are contrary indications with Casa Ramos differently than Purple Plum.
But my point is that you decided to disregard these indications that she was manipulative as part of your assessment in this, as part of your opinion in this case, right?
I didn't disregard them, I considered them.
You considered them, but chose to find them to not be of enough value to factor into your assessment, right?
I factored in behavior her behavior toward men prior to the killing. I factored in her behavior with both restaurants. I factored them all in.
You've already told us that, but my question to you is more pointed. You came in here and you indicated that the defendant was manipulated by Mr. Alexander, correct?
Abused by Mr. Alexander.
All right, and that has a component of manipulation, correct?
Yes, it would.
And in fact, in this particular case, what we have is the defendant exhibiting manipulative behavior after she kills him, right?
Correct.
And what you're saying is, even though she's exhibiting manipulative behavior, I'm not going to believe that manipulative behavior. That's what you're saying, right?
No,
Because
I'm not saying that.
So you
I'm
do
saying
believe-
I believe that she could have been manipulative with men at that time. I'm not disregarding that.
if she is manipulative with men, you would agree that Travis Alexander was a man, right?
I said she was
Testimony as to when supposed manipulation took place.
overruled.
Yes or no? Was Mr. Alexander a man?
Yes, he was.
And you just told us that she could be manipulative with men. You just told us that,
I
right?
said at this period of time, she was manipulative. And in Casa Ramos, which was during that period of time, the statements were that she wasn't. So I have no evidence prior to Mr. Alexander that she was manipulative with men. I just don't have that
What you're
evidence.
telling me is that somebody is telling you, according to you here, that there's no information on the left side, but on the right side, somebody's being very specific that she's manipulative, right? That's what you're telling us, right?
Specific as to manipulation. There's no specificity.
Overall.
Right, that's what you're telling us. You have two competing views, according to you, right?
I have competing views
Yes or no?
after the killing.
Yes or no? You have two competing views. Casa Ramos on the left side, Purple Plum on the right side. You have two competing views, right?
Those two competing
Right.
views.
And what you decided to do as part of this evaluation is tell me, well, I believe what people were saying at Casa Ramos, right?
No, I did not say that.
Well, you are disbelieving what people are saying at the Purple Plum, right?
I am also looking at,
Yes or no? Are you disbelieving what people are saying?
I have other information about what people said at the Purple Plum that I also took into account, Mr. Martinez.
And so what you're saying is that you're disbelieving what was said at the Purple Plum about her being manipulative. That's what you're telling me, right?
Even if I say I believe that she was manipulative at that time, it doesn't mean I believe as a characteristic that she is. I could believe that she was manipulative at that time. It does not, it's situational. It doesn't mean that I believe as a characteristic of Ms. Arias that she's a manipulative person.
And what we know with regard to this assessment is that when she was younger, we have information from you that she was not abused and she liked to play the victim, right? You have that information, right?
You're
Don't answer the question.
mischaracterizing.
Don't answer the question. I'm sorry, repeat your objection.
The question is mischaracterizing the testimony.
Overruled. You may answer.
Right? You told us about that when she was younger, right? That you have that information, right?
I have one friend
Yes
saying
or no?
that. I have one friend,
Yes or no?
yes, one friend.
And then you're now telling us, and this is when she was younger, right? And now you have her immediately after the murder, 5 days after the murder, exhibiting manipulative behavior. Yes or no?
Yes,
So what you're saying though is at one, you have an expanse of years in between, right?
yes.
And what you're choosing to say is, well, even though there was this behavior here when she was younger, and there's the same behavior when she was older, you're choosing to say that was aberrant. That is not something that was a characteristic of hers. That's what you're saying, right?
I'm saying that what I hear from one teenage friend of hers is limited compared to what I heard from other sources in regard to Ms. Arias. And so there is a preponderance of evidence on the one side and not on the other. That's what I'm saying.
Is that your standard that you use when evaluating this evidence, the preponderance of the evidence? Is that what you're using? One is more likely true than not? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that when I have numerous collateral sources,
I'm asking for your definition of preponderance of evidence.
and I'm
More likely
telling,
than-
and I'm going to tell you what it is.
Is it, my question is more pointed than that. Does it mean more likely than not?
No,
You're using it differently.
I am.
What's the standard in one sentence that preponderance of the evidence means to you?
For me, preponderance of evidence means that I have looked at all of the evidence that I have available to me, and I have gone through it and looked at what appears to be the truth. What for me makes sense, what for me, after I weigh all of the evidence, makes the most sense to me. And that's what I have to go on. What I have been presented with is what I have to go on
And your definition of preponderance then is what appears to be the truth. That's what you just said in part, right?
in weighing the evidence.
Right. And so in a sense, what you're saying is you're a human lie detector, right? Because whatever may appear to be the truth to you may not appear to be the truth to somebody else, right?
I would not call myself a human lie detector. I think
Well,
that
you-
mischaracterizes me.
You evaluate this in terms of what appears to be the truth to you, then, right? Right?
And that's the context of what I'm saying
And
today.
what appears to be the truth to you in this case, in terms of the Purple Plum and the Casa Ramos example, to you, the Casa Ramos example appears to be the truth. Yes or no?
I didn't say that.
Well, we were talking about it in the context of the Purple Plum. Didn't you tell us that that's what appeared to be the truth to you?
No.
You may answer.
I said that what they said at the Purple Plum could be true.
So she could be manipulative towards men at that point, right?
I said that
Yes or no?
situationally, it
Yeah.
appeered that could be true.
So
That
if
was
it's-
their perception.
So if it's true that she could be manipulative towards men on June 13th of 2008, it could also stand to reason that a week or 2 weeks, let's just go with 2 weeks. 2 weeks before that, she could also be manipulative towards men, correct?
It doesn't stand to reason.
I'm sorry, the objection.
Speculation.
Overruled.
It
Correct.
doesn't stand to reason.
I know you're saying that this is your view of what you believe is the truth, but isn't it based on the continuum that we've established here? Young, right after the murder, isn't it also true that it could be true that she was manipulative before the murder? Because it,
Approach.
Oh, okay. Another. This has more sidebars than the Young Thug trial.
Yeah, to be fair, I'm only situationally a B word. It comes and goes.
Oh.
It could,
May continue.
with regard to this issue of manipulation, it could be that we've seen two instances of manipulation here, correct?
Objection made, foundation.
Sustained, rephrase.
You told us about an incident that you investigated when she was a teenager, and you told us about an incident that you investigated on June 13th of 2008, correct?
Correct.
Prior to, those are incidents that can be characterized as manipulative, is what you told me, right?
Objection is characterized as an incident when she was a teenager. There's no incident.
Overruled.
Correct?
That wasn't an incident.
These statements that were made when she was a teenager, and somebody saying that she played the victim when she wasn't abused, could be characterized as manipulative, yes or no?
Objection is characterized as the evidence.
Overruled, you may answer.
Correct?
They could.
And you've already talked about the case involving the purple plum, and that could also be characterized as manipulative, correct?
Yes, it could.
Do you remember that we talked yesterday about a text message that was sent by the defendant to Mr. Alexander, and this text message was sent mistakenly? Do you remember that we talked about yesterday?
Yes,
It was to an individual named Stephen. Do you remember that?
yes.
And that as part of that text message being sent out, Mr. Alexander became upset, right?
You
saw
became
that
very
text.
upset.
Right. And then the defendant created another text message and sent it. And it was almost the same as the first one. Do you remember we discussed that?
Yes,
Could it be that this individual that is manipulative, given those two incidents, could have sent that text message just to get a rise out of Mr. Alexander and manipulate him into paying attention to her?
are you asking me hypothetically if someone who is not known to be manipulative with other men that she's with and spent incredible amounts of time with, if she could do a manipulative behavior? Are you asking me if it's possible for her to
Sure.
do something?
Isn't it possible that that was manipulative also?
It's possible that most of us have done something
I'm not asking
manipulative.
about you. I'm not asking about me. I'm asking about her.
It's certainly possible.
And with regard to her going to visit Ryan Burns, you talked to her about that, right?
Yes,
And when she went to visit Mr. Burns, one of the things that happened was that they were involved in some sort of sexual contact. Do you know about that?
they were making out.
And during the time that they were making out, one of the things that the defendant, do you know why the defendant was making out so shortly after the killing? Do you remember what she told you about that?
I remember that she was trying to act normal.
She was trying, which is another form of manipulation, isn't it?
I think that's manipulating yourself. I think it's trying to make yourself feel normal in a situation that isn't.
Well, ma'am, if she has Mr. Burns laying down and she gets on top of him and straddles him, do you really think that she's trying to make herself feel normal, or do you think she's trying to make him feel normal?
Do I think?
Ma'am, we have evidence.
I don't know I think she's trying to feel normal. I think I would want to feel normal, or anybody would want to feel normal after what happened.
So you're now injecting yourself into this. You're saying that your standards are that if you kill somebody, you would that same day go and have some sort of sexual relations with somebody else. That's the standard that you want to apply?
You know, I'm not saying that, Mr.
Well,
Martinez.
ma'am, isn't that what you said? If I were, didn't you just tell me that?
Let me rephrase
I'm
that.
not asking you to rephrase it. I'm asking you a question. Didn't you just say, if it were me, something to that effect?
I think you probably know that the answer to that is,
I
that
don't-
is not my standard.
You
No.
don't, ma'am,
Sir,
I don't go
sex is a
and
stress relief.
behave.
Damn
we
it.
don't, you understand that. You're
This is why when you get a weird question, take a pause, think about what you're going to say, and then say it. Don't be reactive. But this is Mr. Martinez' standard approach. Get them wired up, and then all of a sudden they say something they probably didn't mean to. And then, ka-ching, he goes in.
I mean, to be fair, I would have just said, well, it releases endorphins and happy people don't kill their boyfriends. I would go full Legally Blonde with it, but this is why I'm not an expert witness in anything but sarcasmology.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we are at 2 hours, so let's search for a good place to stop for today. But have you subscribed yet? Have you put the thumbs up yet? Have you done everything that you are supposed to do? And if you haven't, you have a few minutes to do so. And
For
super
shame.
chats and all the monies.
Standards, personal standards are unimportant here, correct?
Okay,
But you keep interjecting it by saying, if it were me. Do you agree then that by you saying, if it were me, you are attempting to interject your standards here, right?
I misspoke.
When with regard to your standards, in fact, there was an issue that was created in this case because of your standards, wasn't there?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Do you remember that you told me in our interview that you didn't ask certain questions of the defendant because you were old-fashioned and you were embarrassed?
Oh, it's sexual questions?
Ma'am, isn't it true that you told me that you were old-fashioned, yes or no?
There were sexual questions I did not ask because they do not come easy to me to ask. Yes, that's true.
It was much more strong than that. You indicated that you were old-fashioned, yes or no?
Yeah, I'm old-fashioned.
And it's because you were old-fashioned, that restricted you in asking the defendant certain questions involving the sexual aspect of hers and Mr. Alexander's relationship, right?
I read about them.
Ma'am, I know you want to tell me that you read about them, but isn't it true that you did not ask her about them, right?
I asked about them later, after I had spoken with you, after our interview in November. There was a sex tape. I did ask her questions.
I'm not asking about the sex tape, ma'am. I'm asking.
There were questions I did not ask that I had not asked when you and I had our interview, and there were questions I asked after that.
Isn't it true that, first of all, you told me that you were old-fashioned, right?
Well,
Abstain.
Yeah. I have a strong suspicion this will go on. So
I just can imagine Grandma, sex negative, third wave feminist. So when you guys were not clothed and doing what I can only assume is part of the Kama Sutra, did you feel abused? Tell me you felt abused.
when he did the insertion into your exit, yeah.
Just, I mean, look, I would not want to talk to Jodi about her. I would let my eviler twin Sal take over that part of the of the interview.
Oh, he would have no issues asking those questions.
No, he'd be like, "So what? Go into graphic detail."
Show and tell session. And speaking of Sal, you are being redirected to Sal because he will be talking about peens today, and
for a change.
For a change, he is doing what's the case name?
The Jensen trial, Mark Jensen.
Yeah, Mark Jensen trial, and Sal has gotten mails from the court with information that has never been seen before.
Ooh.
So yeah, so you will all be directed over there. Yeah, and lucky for us, she will be on the stand on Tuesday. Tuesday at noon Eastern time, 6 p.m. Swedish time. She will be there on the stand. We are going into the smexy things, apparently.
Oh.
And next Saturday, dramatic reading of Jodi Arias' manifesto in case she became famous.
I mean, Ted Kaczynski had some points, so maybe she will talk about how technology is ruining our future.
Yeah.
It's bad when you're reading Ted Kaczynski stuff and you're like, I kind of agree with all of the things he's saying. This is not good. But I don't like math, so and I enjoy bathing, so no outhouse in the wilderness for Mo.
But everybody, thank you for being here. Later today, I'm having my serial killer Saturday. It is Eileen Warnes. She's not on the stand yet. We still have a few more witnesses to go through before she takes the stand, I think. But enjoy Sal, and then come back to me. Okay? Thank you all.
Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye.
The State of Arizona versus Jodi Arias, verdict, count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant as to count 1, first-degree murder